Peace, family. I'm back with another one. If you're new to the channel, hit that subscribe button. This is the Helping Our People Elevate YouTube channel. Like I said, we have our study classes every second and fourth Thursday of the month. If you're interested in joining those classes, leave a comment, tap in, let me know. This is going to be over the forgotten history of the white slaves from Moorish captives to indentured servants. And we're going to talk about the Viking trails and the slave trade in medieval Europe. And so without holding y'all, like I said, hit that subscribe button if you're liking the content. I appreciate y'all checking the videos out, but hit that like button. You know what I'm saying? Help me get this video in algorithm. Help me get this platform pushed up a little more. You know, I'm trying to hit that 1,000 before the year end. But without holding y'all, we're gonna jump straight into it. And so, like I always say, peace and love, family.
On behalf of Akuno Senko for Bay, you know what I'm saying? Jay, where you at? We're trying to help our people elevate. Hope. H-O-P-E. We're giving them hope. We doing what we gotta do, you know. Every day, one step at a time, man. We gonna make it happen. Helping our people elevate. Yeah. Sometimes I practice focus, thought, and meditate. I'm trying to come with other ways to help our people elevate and seeking knowledge, make me levitate. The lifted mental state is what results from how we orchestrate. This for the family's sake. Let's self-reflect and self-evaluate. And every day, make sure the steps you take, you calculate. Receive a master's fate. I know I can't exist without the hate, but that's okay. I balance that with higher self today. Success is on this way, and after that, my flesh can pass away.
All right, so like I said, family, we're going to talk about the forgotten history of white slaves from Moorish captives to indentured servants, Viking trails, and slave trade in medieval Europe. And so we're going to start with this ancient map. This is a map of Morocco, and I'll show you a better map or a closer map as we progress further in. But as it says, it's the top left, right up here, right in this area right here, you'll see it says Kanji reign, Christianity in Africa. And so, like I said, this is an old map of Morocco. And as you see down here at the bottom, it says Marachi, which is, I guess, the ancient way of saying Morocco, and Afrique, but you see Africa. And so, again, as I said, another presentation before I go into it, we're going to start off with the word slave and its etymology. Etymology deals with the origin of words, the mother or the root of the word. And so we're going to start with the word slave, coming from the 13th century, sklav, esclave, a person who is chattel or property of another, from Old French, esclave, like I said, 13th century, and directly from medieval Latin, sclavus, Slav, sourced from Italian, so it came from Italian, Chavio, but anyway, just going to Spanish esclave, but originally a Slav. And so it deals with Slavic people. The term slave comes from the Slavic people. So used in the secondary sense because of the many Slavs sold into slavery by conquering peoples. And so in its etymological sense, in its origin, the origin of the word slave comes from the Slavic people who were sold by the people who conquered them. Men, women, and children were captured to such a devastating extent that vast numbers of seacoast towns were abandoned. According to Robert Davis, between 1 million and 1.25 million Europeans were captured by Barbary pirates and sold as slaves in North Africa and the Ottoman Empire between the 15th and 19th centuries. And so that's why if you go back to the Ujima tribe lessons that I have on here and look at the re-examining the slave trade, as Brother Quasi broke down, you'll see that there were treaties between the Moors and the Europeans during the 15th, 16th, 17th centuries, 18th centuries. And so, yeah, there was wars going on. And so the whole slave story is false. Even the term slave, like I'm showing you here, its etymological sense, it goes right back to the European, so-called white man or white people. The history of white slavery is a complex and often misunderstood topic. While the term slavery is most commonly associated with the transatlantic slave trade involving Africans, there have been extensive history where Europeans were subjects to forms of slavery and forced labor. But why is this never talked about in the school systems? Why isn't white slavery or the origin of the word slave ever taught? Because of social engineering. They want us to believe that the so-called Indians were here and they just brought so-called blacks as slaves from Africa, which is a false narrative, which is a false story. So we're going to start with the Barbary slave trade. Between the 16th and 19th century, Barbary pirates operated from North Africa captured Europeans and sold them into slavery. Many were taken from coastal areas in Europe, particularly from Spain, Italy, and even far north as Iceland. Estimates suggest that between 1 million to 1.25 million Europeans were enslaved during this period. These individuals were often forced to work in brutal conditions or held for ransoms. Same thing as the European slave story told us. That, they were forced to work and they were held under bondage until either they were free or someone had to pay for their freedom. Same thing they do in the jail systems today. For over 300 years, the coastlines of the southwest of England were at the mercy of Barbary pirates from the coast of North Africa, based mainly in the port of Algiers, Tunis, and Tripoli. Their number included not only North Africans, but also English and Dutch privateers. Their aim was to capture slaves from the Arab slave markets in North Africa. The Barbary pirates attacked and plundered not only those countries bordering the Mediterranean, but as far north as the English Channel, Ireland, Scotland, and Iceland, with the western coast of England almost being raided at will. And remember, when they say in Arab, they're talking about the Barbers, these were dark-skinned people, not the Arabs y'all thinking of today. When people try to say, oh, the Arabs, they don't know what they're talking about. These were Moors. As you see in the image here, the brother right here, dark skin. Brother back here with dark skin. This brother got dark skin. And they have the same fezzes that you see us wearing today. Same head attire that we wear today. So this is not something that's new. This is ancient culture. The dark-skinned brothers, these were Moors, as I said. And this isn't something I put together. These are old art or paintings that people drew to describe what the people look like that they saw in those locations. These were Moors, like I said. Again, these are Moors. So the Arabs they were talking about, or the Berbers, in the video I'm gonna play in a little bit, he gonna talk about pale skin people, but you just listen to him. That's why I'm showing these pictures, because these pictures are important, so you'll see the reality of what these people look like. So then we go into the map of Barbaria from the 17th century, where it traded in white Barbary slaves. As I've said before, it's estimated that up to 1.25 million Europeans were enslaved by the Barbary corsairs. They have come to be known as the white slaves of Barbary. Slavery is one of the oldest trades known to man. We can first find records of the slave trade dating back to the Code of Hammurabi in Babylon in the 18th century BC. People from virtually every major culture, civilization, and religious background have made slaves on their own and enslaved other peoples. However, comparatively little attention has been given to the prolific trade in Barbary slaves that was carried out by the pirates or corsairs along in the Barbary coast, as it was called by the Europeans at the time, and now what is now known as Morocco, Algiers, Tunisia, and Libya. And so again, showing you that these were Moors or so-called Black people in power during this time frame. But as I said, all people have enslaved their own people, so don't act like I didn't say that. You can type that in the comments, that's fine, but I'm not saying it's good, or all people have held other people as bondage, because as I explained, the term slavery comes from the Slavic people. And so you had indentured servitude. In the early American colonies, especially the 17th, 18th century, many poor Europeans entered into indentured servitude. Although not technically slavery, this system involved a person working for a set number of years, often 4 to 7, without paying in exchange for passage to the Americas in the hope of land of freedom and afterward. This goes back to what is called the Naturalization Act, where they had to stay on the land for so many years, work the land for so many years in order to be considered citizens of the land. The conditions for indentured servants could be harsh, and some did not survive their terms of the service. While they were technically free after their service, their reality was often far different from with many continuing to live in poverty. Criminals as indentured servants. Transportation Act of 1718. The British law allowed courts to sentence convicts to transportation to the American colonies as an alternative to execution or imprisonment. Convicts would be sold to labor for a fixed period, typically 7 to 14 years. Reasons for criminal transportation. Britain faced overcrowded prisons and wanted to rid itself of what is considered undesirable elements. By transporting criminals to the colonies, the British government found a solution to both problems. Types of crimes. Crimes that could lead to transportation range from serious offenses like theft or assault to more minor crimes such as petty theft or poaching. These individuals were often poor and had little chance of finding gainful employment in Britain. And so again, they sent the criminals here. Look at how the United States was built. Look who they sent here. Look who's running the country. Experiencing a new world, they dealt with harsh conditions. Indentured servants, whether they had committed crimes or not, typically faced harsh work conditions. They worked long hours on plantations and mines or as domestic servants. Domestic servants. Who do you think the people were that were watching the slaves on the plantations or watching the ancestors, watching the prisoners of war on the plantations? Who do you think was watching the people? They were criminals. Just like the video I did where the brother's been falsely convicted. He talks about how the district attorney that was defending him, this man went to jail for selling narcotics to the police, and then he gets out, get a law degree, and now you defending somebody and you falsely convict a man for something he didn't do. And if y'all haven't seen that video, go check that video out because that brother has a story to tell. But let's get to it. They had limited rights. Indentured servants had very few rights during their servitude. They could be bought, sold, and punished by their masters, and many died before completing their terms. White indentured servants were European immigrants who signed contracts to work for a master in the English colonies for a set amount of time in exchange for passage to North America, food, clothing, and shelter. So they came over here, they became naturalized. You work for a little bit, you tend to the land, and we'll make you a citizen. These contracts, also known as indentures or covenants, were usually for 4 to 7 years, but could be as long as 11 years. Non-convict servants served shorter terms than convicts who had to serve at least 7 years. So 7 was the minimum for a convict. But if you were a non-convict, 3 or 4 years. In the 1600s, white indentured servants were concentrated in the Chesapeake colony of Virginia and Maryland, where they worked in the tobacco field. In the 1700s, they were also found in Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and New York. Some had done this work in their homelands, but the colonial system was particularly harsh. Convict labor. During the 18th and 19th century, the British government transported convicts to the colonies like Australia. These convicts were forced to work, often under brutal conditions, as part of their punishment. Although different from traditional slavery, the forced labor of convicts in British empires shared similarities with other forms of coerced labor throughout history. Serfdom in Europe. In many parts of medieval Europe, serfdom was a system that bound peasants to the land and the service of their local lord. While serfs were not slaves in the strictest sense, their freedoms were severely limited, and they were often subjected to harsh conditions and treatments. The system of serfdom persisted in some parts of Europe until the 19th century, notably in Russia, where it was abolished in 1861. The Viking slave raids. Vikings from Scandinavia were known for raid coastal communities in Europe during the early medieval period, capturing people and selling them into slavery. These slaves, also known as thralls, were typically used for labor or traded across Europe and Middle East. The Viking slave trade or thrall trade was an important part of the Viking economy and society. Vikings captured and sold people as slaves or thralls in a variety of ways. Vikings treated thralls as property, not people, and they had no legal rights. Thralls were used for a variety of purposes, including household work, field work, building projects, and sexual exploitation. The treatment of thralls varied from benign to brutal, and they could be bought, sold, or executed at their owner's discretion. However, there was a rare possibility that thralls could earn their freedom. So during the Viking slave trade or the Viking raids or the thrall raids, they didn't get no freedom. The Ottoman Empire. The Ottoman Empire also engaged in the practice of enslaving Europeans, particularly from Eastern Europe. Many of these slaves were used for labor as soldiers or as imperial household. These instances of white slavery or forced labor were parts of the broader patterns of exploitation and subjugation throughout history. While they differ from chattel slavery that characterized the transatlantic slave trade, they represent significant forms of human suffering and exploitation that deserve recognition and understanding. Where this term came from, the origin that Europeans were slaves first, so-called white people were slaves first. Again, like I said, these were Moors, Vikings, and there were other various groups. Excuse me. And as I said, yes, all nations enslaved their own people at one point in time, but from 711 AD to 1492 under the Moorish Empire, the Ottoman Empire, the Turk empires, the Barbary Empire, whatever you want to call it. These were Moors. And so before I play this video, I just wanted to drop that on y'all, let y'all know that. And we're going to end it with this video. He's going to touch on what I'm talking about for the non-believers. But like I showed y'all this image so that y'all could see, they're going to try to misguide, show you the pale people, but these are what the people look like. And so with that being said, hit that like button, comment, subscribe. Peace and love, family. If you made it this far, catch y'all on the next one. Islam.
One situation which has gone largely unnoticed in history was Jefferson being the first president to send the military overseas into direct action, the war against the Barbary pirates. For decades prior to Jefferson's accession to office, the Barbary Coast pirates of North Africa had been capturing foreign merchant and warships, stealing their valuable cargoes and enslaving crew members, while often demanding huge ransoms for their release. Many of these ships and crews were American. Before independence, American merchant ships were protected from the Barbary pirates by the naval and diplomatic influence of Great Britain, which had threatened the use of military force should their ships be molested. However, that American protection came to an end after the colonies won their independence. The Barbary pirates also attacked the coastal northern Mediterranean, launching attacks against France, Italy, and Sicily, kidnapping women as white slaves, primarily and whenever possible, notable wealthy persons and ships for ransom. In their feverish search,
like I said, he's going to show you the pale skin images, but remember, these were Moors, these were dark-skinned people.
For white women slaves, a few pirates even went as far as the coast of Iceland, raiding inland to kidnap women and bring them back to North Africa. North African slave markets thrived.
What pale people you notice from North Africa? I'm going to leave it at that and I yield.
As, under Islamic law, known as Sharia, although fellow Muslims could not be enslaved, non-Muslims could be and were. Over a period of more than 300 years, it is estimated that 1 million white Europeans, to include those captured at sea as well as through land raids abroad, were enslaved. Many of these were Americans captured at sea. In 1794, in reaction to the attacks, Congress had passed a law authorizing the payment of tribute to the Barbary states. Part of that law was the Naval Act of 1794, which authorized the construction of 6 frigates, establishing the United States Navy. By the end of the 1700s, when Jefferson was Secretary of State, the United States had concluded treaties with all of the Barbary states, the Ottoman regencies of Algiers, Tunis, and Tripoli, along with independent Morocco. When Congress authorized $80,000 for Morocco to not molest American shipping, it was considered a good deal, as it was a cost savings when compared to the loss of ships, cargo, and sailors. The Bey of Algiers, Mustafa Baba, also agreed, and many American merchantmen were escorted by Portuguese warships, as Portugal also had a treaty with the Islamic states. But Jefferson was opposed to paying tribute, which he considered to be a modern Danegeld. When Saxon England paid the Danish Vikings not to attack, it did not work. Although Morocco and Algiers initially agreed, just weeks before Jefferson took office, Tripoli began attacking American merchant ships in an attempt to extract further tribute. Jefferson had seen enough. Jefferson tried diplomacy, and his letter to Pasha Yusuf Karamanli emphasized,